Good morning. We've had a little bit of a scuffle, so thanks for waiting for us while we got you more chairs. I'm Ashley Fick. I'm a program coordinator librarian here at Johnson County Library, and I just want to thank you for taking time out on your Saturday morning to be here, take time to learn about what's going on in the State House. So thank you, and also thank you to our legislators for taking time out on your Saturday to be here. Just some quick housekeeping before we get going. We've got note cards on your chair. That's how you can ask a question. Please don't shout out. That slows us down, makes it so we can get to less questions. Also, make sure your question is legible. If I can't read it, I can't ask it. And in the form of a question, if it's not a question, I can't ask a question. And then one question per card. I bought like 1,000 cards, so you're not gonna run out. If you need another card, just write on another card, and that helps me keep track of what I've asked and what I haven't asked. And then with that, I want to leave us with a fact that a survey just a few years ago asked Americans, do we have a civility problem? And 93% of us agreed we do have a civility problem. I don't know of very many things that 93% of Americans agree on right now, but we agree on that. So we also agree that the path forward is mutual respect. And I would like this event to be an example of mutual respect. So whether or not you agree, we're going to demonstrate mutual respect. And if you want to follow up with something, we've got contact information on all of the chairs that you can contact anybody that's here today. So I'm going to just move into intros. Do we want to move just down like that? Okay. And we have 3 minutes each for intros, and we've got a timekeeper.
Okay, thank you. 3 minutes should be plenty for the House members. The Senate always kind of runs along on that timeline. It's a joke in the State House that we're always waiting on the Senate. My name is Representative Rui Xu. I represent House District 25, which is Northeast Johnson County, so Westwood, Fairway, Mission, that neck of the woods up there. And I'm in my 4th term now in the Kansas Legislature. So it's an interesting one this year. I'll just level set it and steal it from the other 3 here up there. But this is actually a really unique legislature in terms of the ones that I've served on. The schedule has changed a lot. Usually we have a 3-week break in April and then come back in May to kind of finish up the budget, come back in May to take up any veto items that we might have. That's gone. And so now everything is kind of pushed into early, mid-April now. So the session is very condensed. And then we're also at the same time experimenting with a brand new budget process. So the traditional process is that kind of the first 2 weeks of the session, the governor would release her budget, and then the rest of the session, the budget subcommittees kind of work off the governor's budget and add or delete, and then come up with kind of the joint budget at the end of that. Right now, the majority party didn't like that, and so the governor still released her budget, but then the legislature has their own budget. So essentially the House has their own budget, I believe, and then the Senate will have their own budget. And so we just have all these different budgets floating around right now, and then we got to kind of cram them all together, again, by early April to pass out the budget, which is the only thing that we have to do every year. So I think for all of us up here, it's just kind of fast and unknown, and it's just a really, really weird vibe in the legislature this year. Just real quick, so I'm on financial institutions and pensions. I think probably most relevant for everybody that's going to happen this year in that committee is that we're looking at KPERS 3 enhancements. There's a proposal out there right now. It'll improve KPERS 3 benefits about 10%. It's not going to be life-changing for KPERS 3 retirees, but it'll be a little bit better than it was, especially compared to KPERS 2. I'm on commerce. We're looking at some housing and childcare things through commerce, and then I'm on taxation as well. And so the big thing this year, and that we hear at the doors, is property taxes. And so the Senate's passed a proposal that kind of caps valuation increases at 3%. The House has a kind of a proposal that just got introduced that I'm interested in. It's a softer cap, and so it's kind of the 6-year average of your property value increases. So we're in the early process of that, but we are looking at ways to kind of decrease property tax, or at least slow down property tax increases. So with that, really anxious to hear from your questions. Excited to be here. Thank you, guys.
Good morning. Welcome to House District 24. My name is Jarrod Ousley. I have represented this district since 2014. I serve on House Appropriations, where we're assembling that budget. I serve on child welfare reform, or child welfare and welfare reform, and K-12 budget. One thing I want to mention about the condensed calendar or session planner, my second year here, I believe it was 2016, we had the longest session in history. We ran 114 days. Kansas is scheduled to run a 90-day session. So while I agree the session has been extremely fast-paced, and being on K-12 budget, assembling half of the state budget in that subcommittee, and then being on appropriations, where next week in 3 days we've adopted all the subcommittee reports, and we actually have to assemble a bill next week and create the state budget so we can get it over to the Senate. So this session has been grueling, but I will say nothing's ever set in stone. The only rule in the Kansas Legislature that I've found is always applicable is majority rules. So when we decide we don't want to abide by our own rules, we vote to suspend them. So keep an eye on us. So appropriations has been brutal. K-12, we talk about civility. I'm not happy with the special education funding that we got to request to the Appropriations Committee. We only were able to get 30 million to stick instead of the 72 as the state board or the governors had requested, or the 82 as the state board and department had requested. But the tone of the committee has been entirely changed by the chairperson. We've got a new chairperson on that committee, and it has made all the difference in the world. I told a couple of people, I've served on that committee for quite a few years now, and you usually leave angry and getting nothing that you want. And I didn't get everything I wanted, but I didn't leave angry. And so I'm happy to continue to work with my chair and see what we can get there throughout the session. Love a chance to talk about welfare reform a little bit if we have more time. And I look forward to your questions, and I'll yield my 30 seconds.
You mean I get an extra 30 seconds? Oh, I'm amazed.
Senator.
Oh, not for the senator. We don't do that. I'm Cindy Neighbor. I represent the 18th district, which is what I call the heart of Shawnee, and 3 new precincts that Jarrod gave me during the new mapping that they did, and so it's a pleasure to be here today. This is actually my 8th term, so my 15th and 16th years. So I am older than everybody up here, but I've been there longer than they have too. So this came from being in the legislature and 4 children. Anyway, I was around long enough ago to know that we used to spend 5 days a week going to committees. In the last several years, it's been maybe 2 days, and it was really hard to get our business done. Right now, we're operating where we're going to the floor and working Monday through Friday. And so a lot of people get on the elevator tired on Friday going, what is this? And I go, oh, this is how we used to be. And anyway, it is a fast session. There is a lot going on. There are a lot of bills that were just read in on Friday. I don't know how much time we're going to really have to see them, because a week from this Monday, we finish up on our committees on the House side, and we have turnaround in which our bills go to the Senate, and the Senate sends their work to us so we can go through it again. I spent most of my time at the well this week because I'm on insurance ranking, actually, and we've had more bills go through on the floor than anybody else, so I'm sure my brothers and sisters on the floor will be glad to know that I don't have 9 more next week that they'll be seeing me for. I also serve on Children and Families with Representative Ousley here, and I serve on a standing committee for CAPERS, which means we meet about once a year to do an overview of what's happening with CAPERS and look at and hear from the board. And then my third committee is Energy, Utilities, and Telecom. And if you don't know, that's your phone, your electricity, your gas, your oil, your windmills, and transmission lines, and that's how your house is powered. So it's quite a learning experience, one that I love, and I look forward to answering any questions I can today, and I will spend as much time afterwards with questions that you might have. So thank you for having us.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. And thank you for being here. I apologize, my voice is a little raspy, but thank you for being here. I really think it speaks really highly of our community that things like this are so well attended and that our community members are so engaged with what's going on. So again, thank you for giving up some of your time on a Saturday morning to hear from us. I'll share, I'm Ethan Corson, I represent Senate District 7, which is Northeast Johnson County. Our boundaries are from 47th Street out to about 95th Street, and then state line to about 5 or 6 blocks west of Metcalf. I am the ranking Democrat on the Senate Transportation Committee, the Tax Committee, the Judiciary Committee, and I'm also a member of the Senate Commerce Committee. You know, one of the things that struck me about this session is I was talking to a journalist and he was saying, you know, I am just having so much trouble getting motivated for this session. I said, well, yeah, what do you mean? And he said, I've written all of these stories before. I mean, this session has in large part been such a repeat of kind of the greatest hits of things that we've seen before. We've only done a couple bills on the Senate floor, but 2 of them were bills that we've already seen multiple sessions before. We saw a ban on gender-affirming care for minors. We saw a ban on or elimination of the 3-day grace period when it comes to voting. And again, those are all bills that we've seen in previous years. So it does feel like, in some respects, kind of a repeat of a lot of things that we've seen previously. I do think that the big thing to watch is already been alluded to by my colleagues. I think watching how the taxes and budget process ends is going to be probably the most significant thing that's going to come out of the legislative session. There is a huge interest among legislators, having been at the doors in trying to reduce property taxes or at least slow the growth of property taxes. When I knocked doors, I did about 2,000 doors, and that was by far issues number 1, 2, and 3 that I heard from constituents was about property taxes. So there is a real interest in trying to do something on property taxes. At the same time, the budget is tight. And there are important things like funding special education, as Representative Ousley alluded to, that we do need to take care of. So I think between the compressed session, the new budget process, the real interest among everybody in trying to do some property tax relief, and how that budget process will come out in the end, given just the realities of what the numbers are, I think that is going to be really the number one thing to watch as we kind of near towards the middle and end of session. So thank you. I'll stop there.
We've got our first questions coming in. If you have more questions, just raise your hand. If you need a card, same thing, raise your hand without a card in it. We'll figure it out. What is your position on providing affordable housing in Johnson County?
Strong support. I mean, that's something that I think everybody has an interest in. I've taken this kind of line of thinking for several years now, but part of the reason that property taxes are rising so fast is because the demand for housing is much higher than the supply of housing. And so when that happens, you get into bidding wars for houses, right? And so prices go up, which means when you're doing property taxes, the comparable sales go up. And so if we're able to expand the supply of housing, Johnson County and statewide, I think that will really help with the property tax issue. I was going into the session, I was a little bit more optimistic than I am now that we're going to do a lot to address affordable housing. There was an interim study over the summer that was specifically for affordable housing, but the only thing that we've touched on this year was in House Commerce last week, where they were trying to eliminate our affordable housing tax credit, which has worked really well. The year before that this tax credit went into place, we only billed about 400 or 500 new housing units, affordable housing units in the state. The 2 years after that, this affordable housing tax credit went into place, we've been building 2,300 and 2,400 new affordable housing units statewide. And so that's really good to see. It is expensive. It kind of matches a federal program, and so it does get a little bit expensive, but especially in the rural areas, it's really difficult to build new housing for a variety of reasons. So kind of at its heart, support, we're looking at ways to kind of expand options. We know that the local municipalities and counties have difficulties for a variety of reasons implementing affordable housing, so we're looking at statewide solutions.
So I just have to point out the Grand Station across the way. You know, they took Merriam took a vacant building here and installed what is supposed to be affordable, you know, housing. I think affordable housing probably needs a better definition, which brings us to some other conversations, such as, you know, minimum wage increase or living wage. Johnson County has always been landlocked, and, you know, especially here in Northeast Johnson County. So you're going to have to rethink, you know, and I think a lot of our local municipalities are doing so with multi-use, you know, zoning, and the state's not helping out much at all. I think I said at the last town hall, you know, if the state was serious about this, they would have kept the interim that Representative Xu was mentioning as a standing committee and had that work continue through session. So we're all in it together, and we'll do what we can.
There's a difference between affordable and attainable. We all have an idea of what is affordable in our budgets, but that doesn't mean it's attainable. And I think I'd like to see us change the word affordable to attainable, and also start looking at where we can build. It may be multi-use family arrangements, condos, and things like that, because if you look the rent at in some of our apartments right now, it's higher than your house payment. Is that affordable? Is it attainable? So we need to look at, am I done already? We need to look at what we can do. And the other thing is we need to educate our communities, because many of them say, not in my backyard. I don't want apartments. I don't want condominiums. I don't want them above 2 stories high. I don't like this. I don't like that. Well, they're in their house. They're in their dream house. But there are others that can't afford $500,000 homes or $350,000 homes. So I think we need to listen to the community, but also educate our community on what's affordable and what's attainable, because we all have a different definition.
Yeah, I think I'm very much where Representative Xu is on this. I think we need more housing. I think the bottom line is we just don't have enough housing stock in Johnson County, especially you think about Panasonic coming online soon. We're going to have 1,000 people at Panasonic by this summer. We're going to have 2,000 by next year. We really desperately need more housing being built in Johnson County. So I think the reality is a lot of that is going to be more done at the county and city level than it is at the state level, just given the nature of several different dynamics. But I think that's primarily where that effort's going to fall. But I do think we need to be doing everything we can to incentivize construction of new housing. And that includes things like looking at, are there regulatory barriers? What is it that is hindering our ability to create new housing? Because it ultimately does come down to a fundamental problem of supply and demand. So I think if we really want to drive down costs and make it more attainable, we need to have more units, more houses, more apartments, more condos out there. And so I think that's kind of what we need to do. And we need to take a really comprehensive approach and looking at everything from incentives to regulations to how we can get, more young families who want homes in homes. I think we really need to take kind of a 360 view of everything going on around housing.
We already have some follow-up questions about housing. What is a way to control rent for public employees? This particular person's a para-educator.
I don't know that we've seen anything that does that specifically in terms of control rents for public employees. There are a couple of proposals out there that would help out. So just last week in House Tax, we had a hearing on adding renters back into the homestead exemption. We used to have this before 2013. I think you guys all know back in 2012, certain tax experiments came into play, and then they took away renters from the homestead exemption. So being able to add renters back into the homestead exemption will actually allow them to get some money back in taxes for that. That's the only thing that we've really looked at that specifically targets renters. You know, I would love to think that helping out the landlords also lowers the rent for the people that they're renting to, but that often does not end up being the case. There are some that do that, but I think this proposal specifically, which I think most of us are co-sponsors on, would do that.
I don't have anything to add to that other than the co-sponsors. 2 years ago, I missed co-sponsoring a bill that meant a lot to me. I actually went to the court clerk's office and, to see if I could get my name signed on late. And since then, I've decided I wasn't going to co-sponsor anything. So if you're looking at some of these bills and you think, what's wrong with Rep. Ousley? Why didn't he co-sponsor this? It's just a choice I've made. Thank you.
I don't have anything to add. Rui is on the committee that really works on this, and so I don't believe I have enough information to fairly rate or speak to it. Thank you.
Yeah, we've got a Senate bill that would also do the same thing Representative Xu suggested, which, adding renters back into the homestead exemption. I think that's a good thing that we can do. I think with state employees in particular, we are always focused on trying to make sure that they're getting appropriate increases in the budget. So I don't think that you'll necessarily see like any sort of a statewide plan to freeze rent for state employees, but I'm hopeful that when we do the budget that we'll be appropriately compensating our state employees who do a great job and have a really high level of expertise in keeping our state government running, keeping state services at the high level that Kansans expect and deserve. So I'm looking for the budget process to make sure that they get appropriate increases.
And Senator Corson's exactly correct on that. I served on the Legislative Budget Special Interim Committee that established the legislature's budget process, and they excluded all state employee raises because they want to look at hills and valleys. There are some that are grossly under market and some that are above market, and our chairman of Ways and Means has stated repeatedly that we'll go back and we'll take a look and try to level some of that.
Have you considered attending eviction dockets and hearing from those being evicted or making reforms to eviction law?
Open to it. I have not attended, but happy to connect with whoever asked this question and then happy to listen to it.
Yeah, I would just add, I know that the county and Commissioner Fast is working. And I just apologize for not knowing all the details, but I know that Commissioner Fast is working on trying to improve protections and processes for people who are at risk of eviction and making it so they have a longer time period before they can get evicted and improving the process around that. And again, I don't, because it's at the county level, I don't know all the details, so I don't want to misspeak, but I know that Commissioner Fast is working on that at the county level. And I'd be glad to go to an eviction docket and connect with whomever asked that.
Well, and my years serving as ranking on child welfare, children, and seniors, I have attended a couple of sync dockets. The courtroom's powerful, so whoever's recommendation that was, I know where you're coming from.
What is the plan for the unhoused in Johnson County? Which I know this is a county question, but anything happening at the state level?
I'm not aware of anything happening at the state level. If it does, it might come out of the Welfare Reform Committee. They last year went down a path of trying to criminalize homelessness. So again, I think if you look at the legislative leadership, both in the House and the Senate, you'll see where their priorities lay if they're going to establish a standing committee that is looking at criminalizing homelessness instead of attaining affordable housing.
And I would say that recently you probably all have seen in the paper or heard about the county and stuff, or cities looking at buying hotels and making them available to the homeless. And there's been a lot of discussion on that, but that's a home rule type thing, a city and a county. It's not really a state issue per se unless we put our nose where it doesn't belong, which we do sometimes.
Yeah, I would say the only thing that gets touched on if we talk about homeless people specifically is we kind of serve with the body of people who think that homelessness is a moral failing of the person itself. And so if we're talking about homelessness in the state house, it's probably a bad thing. We did touch on it briefly in kind of the housing, getting rid of the affordable housing tax credit last week. I kind of asked, like, what is the cost? Because everybody always talks about the cost of certain tax credits or whatever. And I asked, like, what is the cost of getting rid of this program? Like, what is it, the cost of the cities and the counties if we do get rid of this program that is building a lot of more houses? And the answers were just like vastly increased homelessness. Just if there's not enough houses, if houses are not affordable enough, then homelessness goes up.
Okay, now we have a bunch of education-based questions. What happens to education in Kansas if the Federal Department of Education is eliminated?
Nobody knows. I mean, even talking to my Republican colleagues is like, if they do get rid of the Federal Department of Education, do we have the infrastructure set up to like reabsorb the funds that we've been paying into it and then dole them out to the school? And the answer is just no. So we don't know. I think everybody is just kind of in the we hope this don't happen phase, but I don't think any of us know.
I think chaos is what will happen. Every state, they have their state board of education. We have local school boards that make decisions, but so many things are serviced by the federal government as far as free and reduced lunch, just a wealth of information. And if you don't have a central place from which you can gather information or guidelines, it's going to make it very difficult. We've seen that through different programs that have been instituted over the years, best practices on certain things. I was on the Shawnee Mission School Board for 21 years, and we have a lot of rules and regs that we needed to follow, but the issue here too is, I think, going to become more complicated if you have voucher issues, school choice issues, public-private entities, all of those things, because private schools don't have to report like public schools do. That's what makes public schools public. So I think it's something that we don't want to happen. We need to be very leery of, and we need to speak out and let them know this is not appropriate. Our kids do not deserve this.
I think it would be particularly devastating to the Kansas taxpayer and to our schools in the sense of there's just millions and millions of dollars of federal funds that flow into our school districts from the federal government from various programs. So those are Kansas tax dollars that we paid to the federal government, some of which come back to Kansas schools in the form of these different federal funding mechanisms. So, I mean, if they abolished the department and they kept the funding going, I think that would maybe be salvageable. But if they're also talking about eliminating a lot of this funding, you would have a massive shortfall in your school funding. And so then it would fall on, are we going to increase taxes on Kansans to pay for that? How are we going to fill what would be a significant gap in our school funding if you took out all the federal money that flows through for various programs, whether it's special education, whether it's English language learners, whether it's low-income children? There's just a lot of money at stake that comes in to our school system. And so we would then be staring at a significant funding shortfall in terms of our education funding that we'd either have to just decide that, well, we're going to live with it, or we'd have to increase taxes and find that money. So I think it'd be a really bad result for Kansas kids and Kansas taxpayers.
Can you please explain why special education is not fully funded and what the legislature is doing about it?
I can tell you from years of being on the school board, more than 35 years ago, the federal government said stated that they should pay up to 40. They said up to 40%. They didn't say exactly 40%. And so the guidelines were set, but then they didn't send it to appropriations. So it's yearly funded through appropriations. And right now we sit at about 17%, not that 40%. If we had that 40%, we would not have the lack of funding for special ed. Some of these children can take up to $70,000, $80,000 per year. They have small buses. They have paras on the bus to keep them alive so they can get to school. They have multiple issues. And they, for the parents, the public schools are a godsend because it gives them time to be a parent. Gives them time to go to the store. It gives them time maybe to read a book or watch a program or just do laundry and clean because they need constant care. And if the federal government actually appropriated the right amount of money, as they said, 40%, we would not be having this discussion today.
I'm going to step out on a limb and disagree with my colleague here. If the state if the state stuck to its commitment to fully fund special education reimbursement at 92%, we wouldn't be in this predicament. The feds had a CYA in there, and that they said, up to 40%. So a lot of my colleagues that don't want to make the state investment and what we put in statute, we believe strong enough in statute that special education impacted every one of our students, not just those on an IEP, but every one of our students. And they put it in statute saying we will fund reimbursement costs, and it's reimbursement. It's not, upfront. It's always the schools have to provide this, and then you are supposed to backfill that so that they can continue to provide this. We have not been at our 92% obligation, I want to say, since 2011. It's either 11 or 9. And the last time we funded it 92% reimbursement, it was with help from the feds. I think it was 2009, because I think it was after the Great Recession. And there were some federal monies that come in. We've been taken to court for this before, and I think that's partly what prompted the state to make the contribution last year of the $87 million in shortfall. But that 87 was part of a 4-year plan to get us to our 92%, because we know IEPs, kids on IEPs are growing at a larger rate. So there's more kids needing more services. We're better at identifying, medical conditions. And so as that grows and as the cost of care grows, our percentage rate reduces. And I think currently with this $30 million investment that's in the budget right now, I'll keep my fingers crossed it stays. I think it keeps us at our current percentage, which is around 75%. But Shawnee Mission is being shortchanged today $23 million from the state for not reimbursing that 92% obligation. So while it would be great if the feds would do their part, and it would have been great if Senator Pat Roberts could have convinced his colleagues to do so as, a champion of IDEA. But here we are, and it's on us. We're talking about giving tax breaks, and reductions in other committees while we're not even following the law in our education committee, which is half the state budget. And, back to the federal speculation, it would obviously it would be devastating. And every state does have a state board, right? I'll go along with that, but I'm not sure every state board is enshrined in the Constitution. Education has been extremely valuable to the state of Kansas since inception. I mean, it's half of our state budget. You know, we have made this commitment to this. It's honestly, it's fascinating history if we ever have time. Thank you.
And then we have 2 questions around vouchers on opposing sides. So what is the discussion like around school voucher bills, and how can constituents most effectively oppose them? And do you support Senate Bill 75? And if not, what is your rationale for denying families of limited financial means the opportunity to send their children to the school of their choice?
So I just explained we're shortcoming our education, our public education funding. Why would we then try to cipher off money that's in our Constitution, that's in our statutes, that we need to fund a secondary education system? And especially here in Johnson County, because the reasons you'll hear for this is, oh, the kids are in a failing school. There's not a failing school here in our region. So no, I've opposed vouchers. I've opposed the tax credit scholarship for low-income students. It walks like a duck. It talks like a duck. Call it what you want to, but research has shown that oftentimes those don't go to low-income students, and Kansas has repeatedly increased the eligibility either by income or per pupil for this scholarship. And it seems like every time we have this discussion, there's a little bit more eligibility, because that program's capped $10 million, has been since 2012 when it was introduced in the middle of the night without having any hearing in either chamber. Back to our rules. The only rule is majority rules, and technically if there's a subject in a conference committee report that's not had a hearing and not passed out of a committee and not passed out of a chamber, it's not supposed to be eligible for a conference committee. And this scholarship for low-income students came out of nowhere in a conference committee at like 3 o'clock on a Sunday morning. We talk about having to go back to work, Monday through Friday. There was a time where the speakers would run the House, for 2 weeks in a row, straight, Saturday, Sunday. And, you meet all day, every day, and run till 2 or 3 a.m. So I like to think that even though we're back to work, I'm rambling. I'm sorry. I oppose them.
I would just say on the vouchers, I think we need to be honest about what vouchers are. I mean, vouchers are really welfare for the wealthy. They are welfare for wealthy families who are already sending their children to private schools. Even the most generous voucher programs that have been proposed would only cover a fraction of what it costs to send your kid to Pembroke Hill, Barstow, any of the private schools in our area. So they don't provide transportation. They don't have to accept kids with special needs. They don't have to accept low-income kids. School choice is really the school's choice. It is the school making the choice of what students they want to accept. And so the studies have shown that when you have a voucher program, you really don't increase the number of kids and the percentage of kids who are going to private schools. You really are just providing a subsidy to wealthy parents who are already sending their kids to private schools. So I don't support that, because I think we need to keep our public money that our Kansas taxpayers pay in our public schools that serve all of our students, regardless of income, regardless of family circumstance, regardless of ability. So I want our private schools to thrive. I think sometimes this gets portrayed as private schools versus public schools. If a family wants to send their kid to a private school and have that experience, I think that's fine. That's great. That's those parents' choice. But for where our public dollars go, I am convinced that they need to remain in public schools.
We had this last week, I think, about 1,000 students from Maranatha, private school, and they came to the Capitol. I called it Capitol Chaos Day, because that's a lot of children running around. And why are they out of school there to promote vouchers? Why wouldn't they be there in a classroom? Or if they want to come up and learn about the history of the state, that's fine. But to bring all of these children up, going office to office, speaking about vouchers, is unconscionable to me. And you knew who they were because they were all given a yellow scarf to wear throughout the Capitol for the day. Now, private schools are fine, but not with public money. Just as the senator said, it doesn't go to the right kids, the kids that maybe need it. And they open this up to almost anybody anymore. And the issue is private schools do not have to conform to the guidelines, the reporting, what the requirements are for teachers, none of that. It's their option to do what they want. They don't have to take kids that have behavioral problems. In fact, they walk in the door, they'll probably 3 days later be out the door because that's not their expertise. And if you're going to be a public school, you have to be willing to take all children, no matter color, problem, religion, race, any of that. Private schools don't have to do that. They don't function by the same rules. The other thing is private schools do not want to open their books, their financials. If you go to a parochial school, they'll say, we will stay the way we are because we don't want people looking at our books. They have that right. That's not a problem. But public schools can't do that. That's why they're public. I'm opposed to vouchers.
Yeah, accreditation is an issue. For me, it comes down to a couple of things. I also oppose vouchers and always have. And part of the reason is that we just had the kind of special education discussion on how expensive it is to provide care to special education students. It truly is for the ones with the highest needs. Private schools don't have to take those kids. And they usually don't. They generally don't. And so that means the public schools do have to take these kids and provide this expensive care. No wonder the kind of scores are higher for private schools because they are always able to pick and choose who they do accept. And so the second thing is that vouchers are really, really, really devastating for our rural communities. Public schools are what our rural communities rely on, and their entire communities revolve around football every Friday at these schools. If you pass vouchers, literally what you're doing is you're just taking money from them and giving it to districts like mine, which I'm proud of, but we are highly wealthy and doing just fine for ourselves. In my district, we have Bishop Miege. They're doing okay. You know, in my district, many of the parents send their kids to Pembroke, which is a great school. That's fine. But it's just putting more money in the hands of those parents and taking it out of the hands of the rural parents. And, you know, I'm really proud. I grew up in Rolla, Missouri, which is kind of a mid-sized town. And I still remember going to our football games every single Friday. I don't think we should be taking money away from those schools.
There are 63 counties in Kansas that don't have a private school, an accredited private school. So if you pass vouchers and you start taking money out of these public schools, where are those kids going to go in those 63 counties that don't have a private school option? So it's really just a massive wealth transfer from our rural communities into Northeast Kansas, where people have those options. So, I mean, it would, Representative Xu is spot on. And if I want to go back on the special ed thing because I want to be civil, but I also want to be honest with you. The reason we don't have full funding for special education is because of the Republicans. And that's not to be partisan, that's not to be uncivil, but I don't want anybody to leave here with a misimpression of why we don't have full funding for special education. The governor has put in her budget for multiple years a phase-in plan to phase us up to fully funding education over one, I think was a 4-year phase-in, one I think was a 5-year phase-in. All of the Democrats have supported that plan. We want to fund special education. The bottom line is that is the reason, and I don't say that to be partisan, but I say that to be honest, and so nobody leaves here and goes out in their community with the misimpression of why we're not funding special education.
And if I can, this was raised when we had our K-12 budget report out to appropriations. And I will say that when they stripped all the other enhancements out of our K-12 budget, they left the $30 million in there. And I was talking with my new chair of K-12, who sits right next to me on appropriations. I said, why are we only doing 30 million? Why can't we do the 72 million and, take that into appropriations? If it gets whittled down to 30 million, we still come out with 30 million. He said, I want this to come out of my committee unanimously. I want this to be a strong committee, position, and I want to be able to defend it. And I think I can defend 30 million. And they did not touch the special education funding dollars. Of course, they had to rant and rave a little bit, but when the vote came to strip all the other enhancements out of it, the chair of K-12 was with the Democrats on that committee. And then as we were continuing that conversation, the voucher bill came up. Now, remember, this 30 million is only half of what the state board had recommended out of their 4-year plan, and we're only in year 2 of a 4-year plan. So we're already shortcoming what commitment we started down last session. And this voucher bill has a $200 million fiscal note to it. So while some members of this committee have already agreed to support vouchers, even though they may not have one in their legislative district, they're not willing to make that commitment to the special education reimbursement.
And I can already tell we have more questions than we're going to be able to get to. So I'm going to limit responses. Let's do 2 minutes for the next few. Medicaid expansion seems to be a good thing. How can we combat the misinformation about Medicaid expansion?
We've been trying for years. If you've got an idea, bring it to us, because it makes financial sense. Talking about the feds and the Department of Education and what we receive back funding-wise from them, same difference with Medicaid expansion. It makes financial sense if you put your morals and humanity aside. It still makes sense on the books, and they won't listen to that. In appropriations, we're running through all these budget proposals, and I've repeatedly said in the hallways, the committee is giving haircuts with a chainsaw to state budgets in the appropriations process. But there's $500 million sitting on the table that we won't address because it's titled Medicaid expansion. So if you've got an idea, I'm all ears.
I think that the thing that I would just encourage all of us to do when we're talking to folks in the community, there's been a perception because of a lot of misinformation put out by the speaker that Medicaid expansion would primarily benefit people who are choosing not to work. And so that's sort of the talking point that you've heard. And I'm worried that that's taken hold among some folks who just are hearing this and assuming that it's correct. The reality is that we've done independent studies after study after study at who would benefit from Medicaid expansion. And what you see from these nonpartisan independent studies is you'd see about 150,000 Kansans who don't currently have affordable health insurance who would, for the first time in many of their lives, have access to affordable health insurance. And these are folks who are in a couple different situations. One is they just medically can't work. They just have a medical thing that is preventing them from working. Number two is they are working, but they're working multiple jobs. And they're working maybe 2 different jobs, and they're not getting enough hours at either one of those jobs to qualify for the health care that's offered by their employer. Or number 3, they're just working at a job where their wages are so low. I've got a bill to raise minimum wage. Their wages are so low that they're not able to buy health care from their employer. And then they go on the private market and they're not able to afford that either when they go onto the markets. And so this is a population that is made up overwhelmingly of hardworking Kansans, and those are the folks that would benefit from Medicaid expansion. So I'm just urging folks who are passionate about this issue to be in the community correcting the record that is being put out there that, oh, this is just about helping what we hear, quote, able-bodied people who don't want to work. That's not who would benefit from Medicaid expansion. And the governor's Medicaid expansion plan has a work requirement in it for able-bodied people. So if you could help me get the word out.
What legal actions are being taken regarding the recent House and Senate bills that are anti-LGBTQ children and adults?
I don't know specifically what. I would imagine that there are lawsuits kind of ongoing and being looked at by the ACLU, but I'm not familiar of specific legal actions.
I will say there was an amendment offered in the House that would have included all gender affirming care for any individual outside of the LBGT community, and that amendment was denied. I am not a lawyer. I've never played one on TV, but I think that that sets up a discriminatory law based towards a protected class.
We've been told that there will be several lawsuits coming out of this if it passes. Of course, it's on its way to the governor's office right now. If she vetoes it, there are probably enough votes in both the House and the Senate to override unless they come to their senses when it comes back. This is about hate. This is about not understanding or caring about your neighbor. They're not hurting us. They're not hurting us, but they are afraid of people that are different or people that have a different point of view. And I think it's our responsibility to say, that's not true. You know, what effect are they having on you? And when they label it do no harm or protect from harm, that's a crock from the start. So I would say we need to educate our population, and when these lawsuits come out, this whole law may be found to be unconstitutional. In fact, we've heard it's unconstitutional. So I think what you'll find is we'll be spending a lot of money in court, and how it's resolved, I can't tell you from the courts, but I think it'll be found to be an issue of rights. And when you take a doctor's license away because they're doing their job, that is wrong.
If I can use up a little bit more of my time, just kind of talk more about the issue broadly. I'm of the belief that trans kids deserve dignity and the right to explore their teenage brains like any other teenage kid. You know, for some kids, maybe it is a phase. For some kids, maybe they are truly exploring a different gender identity, and I think that's okay. If you have nuanced thoughts on kind of whether or not we should allow surgery for these kids, I'm open to hearing that. I get that. But the bill that passed is much, much, much broader than just surgeries. It is broad to the extent that teachers cannot use the child's preferred pronouns, preferred name. You know, if a kid who is not trans wants to go by a different name, that's okay. But if a kid who is trans and wants to go by a different name, this bill prevents that from teachers. And I think it is just way, way, way too broad and takes away the dignity of these trans kids to just be able to learn more about themselves.
Will there be clear and transparent notification to voters regarding the elimination of the 3-day period for mail-in votes?
I sat on elections last year, not this year, and the chairman of this is adamant about trying to get this passed, and so is the speaker. The sad part on this is we all know that our mail system right now is deplorable, and you cannot count on the mail service delivering on time. We see people that can't get their meds on time. You know, that's really important. And until we can assure that our mail system is dependable, you know, that might be a possibility. I think it's the bad way to go. It cuts off, it disenfranchises people from voting, and it is really a hardship for our elderly in a lot of ways, and I think it takes one of our constitutional rights away. And 3 days, it's like black helicopters in that group. They're looking for reasons to reduce who votes. That's our constitutional right, and we need to fight for it.
So I would just say there's nothing in the bill that requires any sort of publication or notice or anything, but Fred Sherman, who runs the Johnson County Election Office, in my mind, is an absolute hero and does a great job. Oh, jeez. I didn't even know he was here. He didn't even pay me to say that, but I'll have to find you afterwards. But anyway, I think that Fred and that office do a great job, so I'm hopeful that there will be robust plans, at least in Johnson County. I worry about what happens in other parts of the state, but at least in Johnson County, that office has always been incredibly well run, and they do a tremendous job. So thank you, Fred.
I just want to restate a quote from the well.
I just want to say technically there's no clapping, just as a reminder.
When we were discussing an election bill on the floor the other day, it was stated from the well that motor voter has made it too easy to vote. That's what we're up against, folks.
11, but we started 5 minutes late, so I'm going to try and squeeze in 2 more questions. So one minute now, 1 minute responses. In 2022, Kansans voted to protect abortion rights statewide. As of 2025, legislators in Kansas have again introduced near total and total abortion bans. How do we protect the rights we voted for from these legislators?
I will say legislators are allowed to introduce anything. And then so these are a particularly extreme group of legislators who still support a full ban despite what the people have said. That said, I haven't seen much movement on that particular issue, and that it would be very unpopular if there was. They are kind of trying to nickel and dime on uncertain things. Like we've seen bills that says that you need to start providing child support at conception versus after the kid is born, which kind of touches on the issue a little bit, but not really. But in terms of like actual abortion issues, it's constitutionally protected in Kansas. There's nothing that the legislature can do about that.
So can I just, in my 1 minute, I want to draw people's attention to something that I do think has momentum and that is a direct attack on reproductive rights, and that's we had a Senate concurrent resolution introduced yesterday, Senate concurrent resolution 1611, which would end the merit selection process for Kansas Supreme Court justices and provide for the direct election of Kansas Supreme Court justices. What that is that's an attempt to have our judicial elections politicized. It's an attempt to bring in a lot of money from special interests to try to elect certain judges who will vote in a certain way, and they want to overturn the decision of the Kansas Supreme Court that found a constitutional right to abortion in our state constitution. So that's what that's about. That has a real chance of getting passed. And I think folks need to understand that that's not how it's going to be marketed by the proponents, but that's really what it's about. It's about getting rid of these moderate judges and getting more extreme judges on the bench. And that's what it is. And so I would just encourage you in your community to talk about it for what it is.
And then for the final question, we're going to do a little bit of a choose your own adventure. What do you think needs to be done for the average citizen to be better educated, more knowledgeable of current events, and how do we get people more engaged? Or we received a lot of federal level questions, so I'm curious, what are you hearing from your constituents that you want to inform them? It's not me, go to your federal senator or your congresswoman.
I think I'll take a stab at the first question. I don't think it's necessarily anything upon our constituents to learn about what we're doing. I think we as elected officials and all of us need to do a better job of communicating to people where they're at. I don't think it's a secret, especially after the last election, that people are getting their news from increasingly disparate sources. And so I've seen a trend sometimes of trying to retreat to whatever source makes you feel more comfortable, and I understand that inclination. But sometimes you just have to be in unfriendly territories to get the news out and give a different perspective. And so that's what I've tried to do, just be on different platforms and reach reach different types of people in different ways to get your message out. I try to be communicative in traditional platforms as well, but we just have to fight back in just kind of different ways that we're not used to.
I have a newsletter, weekly newsletter, that informs what's been going on during the past week. I also put in there how I have voted for or against, especially if it's a bill that is controversial and stuff. But making sure that you can call me at home, you can call me at work, any of those, any way we can get a communication out. I don't like Facebook, but I do have a person that helps me on that because it was hacked a couple of years ago, using social media. But social media also, to me, is sometimes negative. We read a lot of negative things on social media, and people believe what's on there. So I think it behooves us to get that information out, but I think it's also important for the public to go online and learn as much as you can from reliable sources.
I would say I'm just really trying with whatever platform I have to really encourage folks to pay attention to what's going on at the state and local level. It was really humbling when I was running for re-election, the number of people I would talk to who would spend hours a day watching cable news and knew everything that was going on with the respective presidential campaigns and what was going on, who had no idea that I was their state senator, had no idea who their state representative was, had no idea what was going on at their community, at the school board level. And so I'm just encouraging folks that those are the people who are gonna make the biggest impact on your life. And so the more that we can encourage folks to, hey, it's great that you're following the national stuff, and there's obviously a lot going on there, but really it's important that you also learn about what's going on at the state level and at the local level. Representative Xu and Ousley and I, we do a monthly town hall, February 22nd at 9 a.m. At the Sylvester Powell Center. Is going to be our 50th consecutive monthly town hall. So we really try to make an effort to be available. I have a weekly newsletter if you want to subscribe to it. But I would say next time we have something like this, bring a friend who wouldn't normally go to something like this. That's kind of my challenge to everybody. Bring a friend, colleague, family member, coworker who wouldn't normally go to something like, say, hey, I'll pick you up. We'll get free coffee and donut, spend an hour and just learn about what's going on at the state and local level.
So I'm not sure I have much to add to this. Years ago when I was first elected, it seemed like there wasn't a whole lot of public information out, and I feel like I did and my campaign team did a better job of, delivering newsletters and, posting on Facebook. I need to pick that back up. I think the folks right now, there's a dark cloud over D.C. for a lot of people right now. You talk to a federal employee and there's a whole lot of uncertainty and instability. And I think right now, we need to just focus upon what we can. Like the senator was saying, we're the ones that, are creating these laws that are going to impact your kids and your grandkids. But I feel like our constituents do a pretty good job of staying informed. And I have said since I was on the ballot, I'll talk to anybody that'll listen and listen to anybody that'll talk to me. That offer stands today. I know I could do a little bit better job of, a blast, but I also know that, the senator does, the representative does, and oftentimes I don't know if you caught this from today. If I don't have anything to say or anything to add to the conversation, I'm okay with just, saying, hey, here's my number. If you've got something you want to talk to me individually about, let's sit down and let's get coffee. So thank you. And thank you for being here this morning.
Yes, thank you for being here. We still have coffee and donuts, so if you want some, grab some on the way out. I just want to reiterate that we invite every single legislator with constituents in Johnson County to attend these. So if you see someone missing that you want to be there, shoot them an email. I will add them at any point. I will add them morning of. So we try to make room for them. So thank you again, and thank you to our legislators for taking time out on your Saturday.